Hello everyone. They've announced today that patch 5.3 is coming for the next reset, so I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at some of the changes that are coming. I'll go over the global patch notes. If you want further information, I've placed a couple of links in the description so that you can read up in your own time. It's quite a list for 5.3, so let's get to it. Those that follow me on Facebook and Twitter already know this, but for those who are still unaware, there will be no new heroics in Mist of Pandaria. Instead, 5.3 gives us 4 new scenarios, namely Battle on the High Seas, Blood in the Snow, Dark Heart of Pandaria and the Secrets of Ragefire. They are used to tell the story that leads up to both the Alliance and the Horde joining Vol'Jin in his rebellion against Qelric. There will also be a new heroic difficulty for the scenarios, which you can only do in a pre-made group, and it will give you additional goals. Doing a scenario on heroic mode will reward you with extra valor points and a possible epic with a value equal to looking for raid. This heroic mode will be for the 4 new scenarios and Crypt of Forgotten Kings and a Brewing Storm. As I said, these scenarios will tell the story leading up to the point where you join Vol'Jin in his rebellion against Qelric. This rebellion takes place in the Barrens, so we're leaving Pandaria behind and we're all going to, once again, enjoy Barrens chat. The short story behind it is that the Kor'Kron have taken over Orgrimmar, are capturing trolls and are even executing them. The internal Horde conflict is escalating and it's time to put a stop to it. As a Horde player you primarily assist Vol'Jin with his rebellion, and as an Alliance player you also have the task of infiltrating and trying to do some damage from within. After following the initial questline you receive a title. As a Horde you will get Darkspear Revolutionary, and as an Alliance you'll get the Horde Breaker title. Once all of that is done, you are set off to escort caravans, kill some Kor'Krons and gather resources like stone, oil, meat and lumber. These resources are used to buy vanity items and are used for a weekly quest. This quest rewards you with Radical Mojo, and this mojo is required to transform latent Kor'Kron armor into usable epics for your spec. The item level of this new gear will be 489. The events in the Barrens are a world event, so they won't last forever, and it's likely to end up with a conclusion where the story will continue beyond the Barrens and take the next step towards the siege of Orgrimmar. Those that have been paying attention might have noticed that I didn't mention any daily quests. That's because in this patch there will be no additional dailies and no reputation grind. The items are available for anyone who farmed the resources. Refion's questline continues in 5.3, and this time you take a trip to the Celestials of Pandaria. You can visit all of them to hear what they have to say, but you can only accept one challenge. These challenges are based for different roles, so you have one for tanks, one for healers, one for melee DPS and one for ranged DPS. The reward is an epic cloak with an item level of 600, and the stats depend on what challenge you choose to do. Once you're done, Refion will ask you to come back to him once your faction is ready to move in 5.4. Meanwhile, they've also made it easier to catch up for those who still need to do the previous legendary quests. All bosses in Mokshan Vaults, Heart of Fear and Terrors of Endless Spring now have a chance to drop either a Sigil of Power or a Sigil of Wisdom. On top of that, the quest called a Test of Valor will now require to earn 3000 Valor points, down from 6000. As shown in this picture, you can see that the cloaks of Refion are upgradable, so that means that the Void Binders are back. You can once again spend your Valor or Justice points on upgrading PvE gear, and they've also made it cheaper. You can also upgrade any PvP gear from Season 12, but you can't use it for any of the new PvP gear. Speaking of PvP, there are also quite a few big changes coming to that part of the game, so let's take a look. There will be one new battleground named Deepwind Gorge, which you can compare to Arathi Basin. It's a level 90, 15 versus 15 match, where the goal is to earn 1600 gold. You can earn gold in 2 different ways. You have 3 mines that you can capture, and this will generate gold for your faction over time. Or you can try to steal the minecart from the opposite faction and bring it back to your base for 200 additional gold. There will also be a new arena called the Tiger's Peak, which is the training grounds for the Shadowpan in Kunlai Summit. It's a small fighting area with 2 raised platforms and 2 statues, which you can use to kite people around and stay out of line of sight. To create a more balanced team composition, you now need to select a role when queuing up for a battleground or a raided battleground. Picking up the Alliance or Horde flag while in a raided battleground now increases damage taken by 50% for characters in a tanking specialization, and increases damage taken by 20% for characters in a non-tanking specialization. The stats that we're used to in PvP are also going to change. Battle Fatigue now reduces the amount of healing and absorbs by 45%, up from 30%. Everyone is getting a basic 65% resilience. Resilience has been removed from most PvP gear. Resilience gems and enchants will continue to be available and remain unchanged. 4-piece PvP set bonus for all Season 12 and 13 armor sets that granted 1000 resilience now grants 1000 PvP power instead. It will take more PvP power in order to increase your damage, but PvP gear will still have PvP power on it. The amount of PvP power and resilience on gems and Mystic Cogwheel have been reduced to 50%. PvP power bonus to healing is now based on the class and the spec that you're playing in. Healing specs receive a 100% bonus to healing from PvP power. Damage specializations for Druid, Monks, Paladins and Shamans receive a 70% bonus to healing from PvP power. All other specializations and classes, including tanking, receive a 40% bonus to healing from PvP power. PvP power will remain exclusively on PvP gear. Battlegrounds, rated battlegrounds and arenas now have an item level cap. All gear that goes above the item level will be scaled down to item level 496. That's quite a lot of changes to the PvP side of the game, and the reason behind it is that they want more PvE players to try out PvP. By adding a basic resilience for all players, you as a fresh PvE geared rookie won't get killed within 3 seconds. Scaling the gear down to 496 ensures the PvE gear won't become more powerful than the PvP gear. And getting PvP gear is still valuable since it offers PvP power, which PvE gear simply doesn't have. That doesn't mean that there aren't potential problems. For example, the scaling only works for PvP that takes place in an instance. That means that in world PvP, you might get your ass handed to you by a higher geared raider, even when you're running around in your top PvP gear. Blizzard has acknowledged this, and they said that it's a downside to an overall better change. There are more potential issues like PvE set bonuses, but I don't want to go into that discussion because we still have a couple of patch notes to go through. I've placed a couple of links in the description if you want to read up about it, and I'm going to tell you my opinion at the end of this video. So let's finish the list off first with a couple of additional changes. The Brawlers Guild is getting some attention with new bosses, spectator mode, VIP lounge, vanity rewards and the option to find bosses that you've already defeated. Pet battles can now be fought out on all raids and dungeons, new pets to be found on old raids, new quests, new achievements, and everyone can now spectate your fight as you're dueling it out. The experience required from level 85 to 90 is going to be reduced by 33%. You can now choose to receive loot for a spec that's different from the one you're playing in. This option can be used for bonus rolls, raid finder and Pandarian quest rewards. That means that you can, for example, queue as a tank for looking for raid and still farm gear for your DPS spec. Not winning any loot with your bonus rolls will increase the chance of winning loot on your next roll. You can now use items for transmogrification which are stored in your void storage without having to take them out. It will be 60% cheaper to upgrade heirloom items, and the heirloom shields that didn't make it in patch 5.2 will be available in 5.3. So there you go, those are the global patch notes. Now you're up to speed at the upcoming changes and you know exactly what's coming. If you want more details about the class nerfs and buffs and some minor additional changes, you can check the description. I've posted a couple of links that you can check out and you can read up in your own time. Now I want to go to the section where I tell you my opinion about the upcoming patch, but more importantly I want to ask you guys about your opinion. I'm not a huge PvPer, and I especially want to ask you guys that play in arenas and play those PvP matches, what do you think of the upcoming changes? My opinion is that for the PvE side of it, the story, I think it would have been better if the Alliance and the Horde got a separate story. I did a different video where I go really into the lore behind 5.3, and yeah, it just would have been better for both sides if Alliance and Horde got a different story. The content itself, I see this patch as a catching up patch for alts. It's clear that they've made leveling to 90 faster, they've made it easier to get the legendary quest, they've made it easier to get gear, and the main event, the Barons event, is going to be gathering resources for mainly vanity items or epics that are around the same item level as we already have. So that's not going to be a huge upgrade. So yeah, it's going to be catching up, and it's going to be seeing where the story goes. So it might be that a lot of people are going to say, okay, I've done everything up to this patch, I've done the Isle of Thunder, I've done everything, I don't care about alts. You know what guys, good luck, I'm gonna take a little break. I can see that as a huge possibility. Now on the PvP side, I find it very hard to get an opinion on this because all I do on the PvP so far, Mr. Pandaria, are random battlegrounds. The reason why I'm doing this is because of my class, Retribution Paladins, because of the insane amount of burst, the insane amount of crowd control, the insane amount of healing, all kinds of reasons why I don't do PvP. But really, part of that reason wasn't the gear, because as a PvE player, we already have the option to convert our Justice points into PvP points, into honor points. And with those points we can buy PvP gear and we won't be at such a disadvantage. So I don't really get the motivation of We want to motivate players into PvP by making gear less important, because there was already a solution to this problem. In my honest opinion, if you want to get PvE players to play the PvP side of the game, there is a huge learning curve to the PvP side of the game, and that learning curve is non-existent in leveling up from 1 to 90. It just isn't there. So when you enter a random battleground with a 30-second timer or 1-minute timer, there isn't that much time to explain what's going on. And even if you do ask what you need to do, most of the time the PvPers are so vile against you, you might end up getting kicked out of that random battleground. So the learning curve is ridiculous and it's hard to get into. Maybe they should look at that part first on how to fix it. Maybe they should introduce a small 15-second cinematic at the start of a random battleground that explains what your goals are, what you need to do. Maybe they should make training battlegrounds where you don't lose any honor, where you can learn the fight without having any consequences. Maybe they should introduce spectator mode into arenas so people can see how others are fighting instead of forcing them to go to YouTube and watch videos there. I mean, there are so many points that they still need to fix, like class balance, like CC, like bursting, like all those things. And instead they're going to focus on the gear side of things. So they're going to give you a basic resilience with the goal of surviving longer. But in the end you can't tell me that a PvP geared player won't kill that PvE player in a battleground, because otherwise you will make PvE gear stand above PvP gear. Right? So whenever a PvE player matches up against a PvP player in that kind of gear, you might end up with a longer match. But in the end, that PvP player will still win because he has the gear and the other guy doesn't. Unless, of course, you make PvE more viable in the PvP scenarios. And that completely messes up the system. What else do I think about it? If the basic resilience could fix the problem of insane burst where you're killed within 5 to 10 seconds, that would be a huge improvement. That would be fantastic. That would still remain the problem with crowd control, which just isn't fixed. It doesn't fix any problems with team setups that are better than others. It doesn't fix all the other problems, but that would at least be a small step into the right direction. I'm just wondering if the cost of world PvP, because people still play on a PvP server. I mean, if you've made the choice of joining a PvP server with the intention of getting that PvP gear, and now all of a sudden a PvE player might kill you, it's like a huge finger to an entire player base. But on the other hand, if it creates a situation in Battlegrounds and in PvP where gear is no longer an issue, and it becomes really about the class and the player, that's a great step forward in my opinion. But it isn't the entire picture, because you will still have class imbalance. Shouldn't you start fixing that first? Shouldn't you make a second talent spec specifically for Battlegrounds so that you can fine-tune it without messing the PvE side of the game? Isn't that something that you need to work on? Shouldn't you make a item level requirement for Battlegrounds? Wouldn't that make the entire battlefield different? Or is it simply the fact that there are not enough players to fill Battlegrounds that you need to make these changes? Oh well. I'm just rambling on here, and honestly, I'm a PvP scrub with little to no arena experience, so I'm really in no position to talk. I would love to hear from you guys, and I would love to hear what you think about it. Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you like my videos. I hope you're up to date for 5.3 now. I hope you're going to enjoy the patch. And until next time, guys. See ya!